Welcome all. We are thrilled to have you here for our conversation about thriving in a long life world, Principles of Generativity. My name is Seth Green, and on an evening like this one in America and a morning in Hong Kong, I'm especially grateful to say I'm the dean here at the University of Chicago Graham School, which is the university's home for lifelong learning and leadership. And we are very excited to be sharing some of the insights from one of the initiatives of our school called the Leadership and Society Initiative. And we are especially thrilled to be doing so in partnership with the Hong Kong campus. And so I want to turn it over in a moment to Elizabeth O'Neill. Elizabeth is the leader of the Hong Kong campus, as well as Associate Dean for both Global Degree Programs and Executive Director of the Robert Rothman London campus. She'll share a few brief words from the Hong Kong campus. Then I'll make brief remarks giving an overview of the subject matter that we'll be covering. And then the most exciting part is we will be in conversation with Bob Oros, who's an extraordinary executive here in the United States, who is part of the Leadership and Society Initiative as a fellow. And then we'll talk with Diana Petty, who is the executive director of the initiative, to hear her insights across many fellows that she's seen, more than 100 now here at the university. With that, Elizabeth, let me turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, hello everyone and happy Chinese New Year. And thank you, Seth, for your kind introduction. Pleased to be here today. And we're very pleased to be collaborating with the Graham School for this special webinar exploring the principles of generativity in a long life world. So as many of our webinar guests will know, the University of Chicago is now one of the most foremost destinations for accomplished leaders discerning next chapters of purpose. And we're looking forward to sharing resources from the university's Leadership and Society Initiative with guests today on this session. So before we get underway, if I may, I would like to offer just a few brief words about the University of Chicago's presence in Hong Kong for those of you that might be less familiar. So Hong Kong is the home to our flagship campus in Asia, and it's a place along with our other campuses and centers where faculty, students, alumni, and partners advance ambitious research, world-class education, and deep collaborations across the region. And so we're very proud to be the first and only American university to establish a standalone campus in Asia. So our full title, the Hong Kong Jockey Club University of Chicago Academic Complex and the University of Chicago Francis and Rose Yuen campus in Hong Kong. It's home to a number of programs across the university. So Chicago Booth's Sokolov Executive MBA program runs a degree here, a full degree program here. We have many executive education offerings, college study abroad, programs with the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, the Rostondi Center for Social Sector Innovation, UChicago Summer Academy for high school students, partnering with many aspects of the university, and of course, collaborations like this with the Graham School. And last but not least, with the campus here, and we have a great opportunity to convene dozens of academic workshops, conferences, and public lectures each year, featuring both cutting-edge faculty research, as well as thought-provoking conversations with public intellectuals. And this is very much providing a forum to discuss and debate the big ideas and emerging trends which are shaping the global landscape. So in that vein, today's session, it resonates particularly here in Asia, where population aging is both very much a success story and a trend that poses significant challenges for the years ahead. So just a few brief points, and then I'll hand it back over to Seth. But if we consider our neighbors, some of these facts might be quite familiar to the group assembled today, but Japan has the world's oldest population, with nearly 30% of its population already over the age of 65. Closer to home in mainland China, there's a demographic shift of staggering scale, which is underway. And by 2040, an estimated 402 million Chinese citizens, so more than the entire population of the US, will be over 60. And so that sheer speed of that transition is really unprecedented. And here in Hong Kong, we are one of the fastest aging cities in the planet. So life expectancy is among the highest in the world. against this regional backdrop, then we are delighted to be hosting today's session, exploring how one can move beyond simply living longer to actually thriving in a long life world. And so, again, with our thanks to the Graham School and today's panel, I very much welcome everyone, and we'll hand it back over to Seth to take the conversation forward.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. We are thrilled to be in partnership with the Hong Kong Center. Just seeing the audience, I notice a number of our faces here from the US and our community, and then I see so many from yours, and it's just wonderful to be in this global opportunity because, as you say, we are in a world that is living longer, and these are both wonderfully global and also very specific insights, with each region having its own way of engaging these demographic changes. So let me now jump into the presentation segment. I'm going to share a bit of context and then go through what we see as 7 principles of generativity. And I actually see a number of our incredible instructors, Harry Davis and Kerry Burnite and others, on this. So I will just say in advance, you will see some of your insights recorded among the principles of generativity. Let me just acknowledge that some imagery used throughout this presentation is from media sources, which are cited, and then that this reflects my individual point of view as a member of the faculty and not necessarily an institutional point of view of the University of Chicago. So let me start with the longevity revolution and what's happening at the highest level. And then we're going to talk about how that's leading to a new structure of adulthood and what that means for you in a long life world. So let's start with this revolution that Elizabeth has already described taking place. And this is what it looks like. I'll just say that the University of Chicago came into existence in 1890. So when we started as a university, the average life expectancy globally was around 30. In the US, it was around 47. Today, globally, it's around 73. And in the US, it's around 77. Now, we don't take credit for that fully at the University of Chicago, but we have noticed quite a remarkable set of changes in longevity since we came into the world. And so, what it really speaks to is that we have overnight, in many ways, added an immense change to the demographics in the world. And that's not only a change in the expectancy of life now, it's also a change increasingly in the way people are living. We are at a biotechnological revolution where, if you look, for example, at GLP-1s, is just one of the many discoveries that are taking place today, many more coming, of course, with artificial intelligence. We are in a time where it is more realistic than ever that people can actually examine their long lives with great health. And so we are right now coming to what is probably the culmination of what has been a very significant expansion in expectancy. And what's coming behind it now is a very significant elevation in people's ability to stay healthy across that time frame because of the many scientific advancements. What that means in the US, and this is equally true globally, but I just think this is such a remarkable statistic. In the US, if you looked at different demographic groups, the group over 65 went from being the smallest share of spending in the economy in 2005 to the biggest share today. And there's two factors that drove that. One is that there are many more people that are over 65. That is about half of the change. The other half is that in the US in particular, markets have been very fruitful, and so has real estate. And the group that controlled the overwhelming share of a lot of those resources turned out to be over 65. This is not wealth. This is consumer spending in the economy is 25%. If you look at wealth, you're talking about a majority when you get over 50. But what it means is that suddenly we've gone from an economy where everyone was talking about how do I get that 25-year-old to 49-year-old because that's where the lion's share of spending was taking place, to now increasingly people saying, how do I get the 50 plus crowd because that's where the new opportunity exists for consumer-oriented companies. This is all obviously taking place not only on the US stage, but on a global stage. We're seeing a dramatic change in the economy being run really by the demographic changes. And on top of it, it's coinciding with a major disruption in the economy such that people are needing to reskill on a much more frequent basis. Okay, so I know that's a very quick snapshot. But what I wanted to convince you, which you probably joined this webinar because you already believe it, longevity is changing everything. And especially to Elizabeth's points, this is especially true in countries where the pyramid has literally reversed, and you now have massive shares of the population in that 60 plus category. When people are living longer, a question becomes, how do they live it? And that's what I want to talk a little bit about next with what we call here at the University of Chicago the new structure of adulthood. And I'll start with an ancient riddle. This is a riddle presented to Oedipus Rex in Greek mythology. And it's what walks on four legs in the morning, two legs in the afternoon, three legs in the evening, and no legs at night. And feel free, should you want to take a guess at putting that in the chat. But my strong hunch is that many of you are thinking human, and you are right, because yes, exactly, Dorian, it is man. So four legs is crawling. Two legs is when you are walking in your, full life, when you're at your healthiest. Three legs in the evening because you might have a cane, and then you are laying, no legs at all, when you're buried. And what this describes is all the way back to Greek mythology, an idea that we kind of had about the way life worked, that you learned when you're young, you're crawling, you're learning, then you work, you're in your full warrior stage in the middle, and then you retire and you go to a beach somewhere and you relax because you've done the hard work, and you now have a third leg to kind of help you get through. And so this concept is long held in our understanding. It became much more significant with the rise of pensions and Social Security around the time of the Second World War in America and much of Europe. And that extended that latter part where people could spend more time potentially in leisure. But with people living longer and having a much bigger horizon, we are changing that idea. And the reason is that, as was stated by Mary Catherine Bateson, who's a wonderful author of a book called Composing a Further Life, the aim of longevity is not just to extend old age. That if we have longer lives, it changes every chapter of life because it inserts new developmental stages into the life cycle. And we've essentially seen that. And here at the university, we've been very fortunate. David Brooks, who is a noted author and columnist, is one of our core faculty members in LSI. He has a concept that he talks about called the second mountain, where instead of now thinking about just one mountain that you might think of as your career, where you're reaching the pinnacle of a certain industry, you can now think about beyond that potential mountain. What else do you want to accomplish, potentially more from an intrinsic motivation standpoint? There's another wonderful author and thinker that's been very involved in our initiative here, named Aviva Winenberg Cox, and she has the idea of four quarter lives, optimistically thinking in centenarian terms of 100 years. That you might think of that first stage after growing as achieving, but then you have this idea of becoming, the chance to actually think beyond that external mindset and really think about internally, who do you want to become, and then spending those later years harvesting all of the different productivity and ideas that you have for future generations. I'll say that what this has led to in total is a lot of academic work to basically create a new way of thinking about life that is multi-stage. So instead of thinking about it in terms of a very linear format where you educate, work, and retire, we're now thinking about it much more in terms of many chapters, which might mean that you're coming back to learning on a regular basis. And so the skills that you might have in a 100-year life might require you to go back into learning modes throughout life rather than just seeing it all up front, especially in a world that is changing as dynamically as ours is today. So, second part of this is we're living longer. There's a new structure now that is really allowing people to get the full benefits of this longevity. And we have an initiative here at the University of Chicago called Leadership in Society, and we're going to talk to two people who are involved in it. One is a fellow, one as executive director. And over our first 3 years and 100 individuals who are highly accomplished, who joined us, who thought about what do I want to do next, we've developed what we consider to be 7 principles of how you stay generative for a long life world. And I'll start by saying that a lot of these ideas come from the incredible faculty members who are in LSI, and they relate to their own lives as much as the fellows who have now benefited from them. So the first big idea comes from David Brooks and another advisor to the initiative, Rashad Tabakawala. And the idea is that oftentimes you can have success in the early stages in life by meeting external accountability framework. So, as an example, I'm an academic, and there's a certain ladder that you have. So, you want to be at a dean level or you want to be at this next level. And so there's a way of kind of having extrinsic accountability, and then there are things that the external world tells you are really important to have. So one thing leading a school is you need to have a good budget that shows that your school is growing and that you are meeting certain goals for sustainability. So those may be really important, especially at this stage of my life. At some point, though, I may be outside of the typical career framework. And at that point, I really need to be thinking about, okay, in addition to what might be these external goals, what are intrinsic goals that I might have? And how do I reconnect with what originally motivated me into this work, which is for me all about expanding educational opportunity and making sure that more people have access. Another way to say this is from Rashad, who has this idea of not living in other people's minds. And what he means is that when you're successful in a certain context, people begin to assume that that is who you are. And so you're the person that has, for example, a strong P&L, or you're the person that has a certain outcome orientation. And what you want to be able to do is really think internally in your own mind about who do I want to be at this stage of life and allow yourself to potentially evolve. One of the things that's really fascinating about the fellows, many of them have had the highest levels of accomplishment, and then they want to go in a new direction. And sometimes they can feel like because of the expectations around them, they don't necessarily have that freedom. And I'll just share one example of a woman who has been a part of our community who, after being at the very highest levels of academia, she was the chancellor of Purdue Global and was chief strategy officer at Coursera. She realized she really wanted to spend her 70s cooking. And then she realized, after she went to Le Cordon Bleu, I want to help other people cook. So she was telling a friend, I want to work at the Spice House on the Magnificent Mile right here in Chicago. And her friend said, no, you can't do that because you've held all these high roles. What will people think if they see you there at the Spice House advising people on their culinary decisions? And that for her was actually the motivation she needed to go out and actually go and get a job. And so she's worked there for 3 years, just for 10 hours a week. And she has so much fun doing it. And it's allowed her to live in her own mind and be her own person and live her own life and realize that she can have multiple stages and not feel like because she had a stage of being a warrior and had all this accomplishment, she necessarily needs to continue to live in that exact horizon. Second principle, this comes from Harry Davis, who I see is on this webinar, is travel lightly. And it actually comes, without embarrassing Harry too much, from his own experience, because Harry was a professor at the Booth School, and he was one of the most noted marketing professors in the world. He then went in to be part of the dean's suite at the Booth School, and he took in a lot of leadership and learned a lot and was contributing to leadership. And when he was leaving that office, as I remember the story, Harry, he did not have enough space in his new office for all of the books that he had now gained over marketing and leadership. So he had to decide how to move back into his office. And he decided to leave his marketing books behind and ended up being able to have another 30 years, after 30 years of marketing, 30 years of leadership. And now at the university, there is a Harry Davis Leadership Center. And what it speaks to is this idea that if you're going to a new chapter, just like if you're traveling to a new destination, you don't want to take all of the assets that you've built up over time. Or in the case of a vacation, you don't want to take all of the clothes and wardrobe that you've had. You also don't want to go naked. And so you want to think about, okay, I've built up all of these incredible wardrobes. I have all of these different characters. with where I want to go next, what are the couple of outfits I want to take that are going to allow me to build on my experience and all that I've learned, but not weigh me down with the baggage of having to stay with all of these assets that I built up over time. Third principle of generativity is contributing to the lives of others. And this may be obvious, but it turns out that especially as we get later in life, we often feel like we lose our relevance and our purpose. And that can sometimes be that we no longer have the same work or family that we might have been motivated by supporting and providing for. And so we find that people always need to feel part of a greater whole. We are social animals, as Plato said. And so sometimes beyond the burdens that we have in life that can actually be quite joyful in terms of, raising a family, having the opportunity to support the people around you, you really want to make sure that as you come into these next chapters, you're embedding yourself in community and being part of these greater wholes. The fourth is investing in relationships. And this one is about especially investing in intergenerational. It turns out there's a lot of generativity across generations, and there's a lot of research, even things like Alzheimer's and dementia, reduced significantly by social relations in general, but it's even greater when those relationships occur across generations. There was an interesting study that even just grandparents having time with their grandkids 2 hours a week led to significant benefits across a whole range of protective factors on a number of mental and physical diseases. A fifth is to be a learn it all. So, one thing that we talk often about at the Graham School and at the university is that you want to be constantly curious and constantly challenging yourself to learn new things. It turns out that just like our physical muscles, our mental muscles are only activated by challenge. And so, even if you get to be the best in a certain area, you actually want across life to constantly put yourself in situations where you are not the best and where you have to learn from others. Because what it does is it activates those muscles. And I think that analogy to, okay, let's say you've mastered bicep curls, well, then you're probably not going to get as much out of them anymore. You really want to start doing lots of other muscles so that you build a full body. And the same is true with mental agility as well. And oftentimes people get into a place where they get coasting in the expertise that they have. And certainly that can be really great for a career. But in terms of constant growth, you actually want to, across these longer lives, be putting yourself out in more situations where you're actually challenging yourself and you're explicitly the learn it all in the room and not the know it all in the room. The sixth, and I'm looking at Carrie Burnite, who is the world's greatest expert on health span and joy span. You really want to be prioritizing your wellness, it's your future impact. And in a world where people can more reliably now, because of science and knowledge, live longer and healthier, there's a lot more reason to be making implicit and intentional decisions because you have the access to actually your full self if you do so. And then finally, this is my favorite suggestion. It comes from Madeline Albright. She says she wants every stage of life to be more exciting than the last. There's a funny story where she is finishing as Secretary of State, and someone who's a journalist asks her, Madeline, what will your legacy be? And she says, my legacy? I'm still alive. I plan to do so many more things. I can't tell you what my legacy will be yet. And of course, that was her way of saying that even as proud as she was being Secretary of State, she was always looking forward, always thinking about all of the exciting things in the front view rather than in the rear view mirror. Okay, so those are a lot of principles of generativity, but as you might imagine, those are easier to talk about than necessarily to actually do. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take down my screen because we have two people that are actually living these principles of generativity. One is a fellow in the Leadership in Society Initiative, and one is our executive director for the initiative. And so I want to briefly introduce them, and then we'll get started on the questions. Bob Oros, who you see at least at the bottom of my screen, is an experienced CEO and thought leader in the financial services industry. He served as chairman and CEO of Hightower Advisors, and he is currently a fellow in LSI here at the university. Diana Petty is the executive director of the Leadership and Society Initiative after other roles here at the university, including being a leader at the Mansueto Institute, and prior to that, being part of the Bloomberg administration in New York. And so let me start, Bob, with you. You led a remarkable transformation as CEO, helping bring your firm from 50 million to $400 million in annual EBITDA in just 5 years. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that moment that you finished at Hightower Advisors and you were kind of thinking about what to do next. And, you decided you might want to pursue more of a portfolio approach to leadership in life. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how you were thinking about that transitional moment. And then what about LSI made you feel like that was the right partner as you stepped into your next chapter?
Well, thanks for having me, Seth. I really appreciate it. I love this conversation because I think it's so important, uh, and not just for leaders, for anybody to be thinking a bit about what's next and to not be flat-footed. So I'll try to, bring your question to life by sharing a couple of things. And the first one is, I've long had a leadership philosophy that most leaders stay too long. And I get why it happens. Like, these are really prestigious jobs. You have power, you have control, and I don't mean that in a bad way. And you're probably not paid too badly either. My own belief is 5 to 7 years has been my shelf life, and I feel like in 5 to 7 years, I'm going to bring whatever unique gifts I have to the role, and then it's probably time to let someone else bring their unique gifts to it. So if you look at the math, we had a great experience, being a part of a team that grew the firm exponentially. And if you've ever been a part of that type of, business, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's everything you can imagine. It's also exhausting. And so like I knew, and I actually ran the firm for about 6.5 years. So I hit my 5 to 7 years pretty square on. I was talking to an ex-colleague from 20 years ago last week, and we were just talking about my journey. And he's like, "Do you remember when you told me that your plan was to retire by 60, to sit on boards?" And I actually didn't remember telling him that, but I didn't actually come. It didn't surprise me because I'm a planner. So like way back then, me telling him that's what I was going to do was probably a bit of pie in the sky. What did I know? But the fact that I had a plan and that actually like achieved it was pretty remarkable to him. So, I stepped down last June 1st. I turned 60 this January. I've become a grandfather. So a lot of things in my life have changed. But I would also say I feel younger at 60 than I did at 50. And so I really do believe this concept of like, I'm now middle life. I'm not late life. Like back when my parents were getting this age, they viewed that as later life. But when I also heard that story, I'm like, man, maybe I'm too much of a planner because like over planning takes away some of like the variability that you want to expose yourself to. So I want to share a couple of comments from someone who's influenced me, and that's an author by the name of Chip Connolly. And similar to what you described, Chip's view is that there's sort of this first phase of life, which is all around capability. You're building your capabilities, bigger, stronger, faster, bigger job, bigger house, nicer car, whatever it is. And then the next phase is all around crystallized wisdom, is what he calls it. And I just always loved the way he described that and like crystallized wisdom. And then he also has this concept of being a modern elder, which is somebody who's as curious as they are wise, which is something else that stuck to me. And so as I started thinking about, you know, last fall, before I had even announced publicly that I was leaving, somehow LSI popped into my LinkedIn. And not because they were looking for me and not because I was looking for it, but like when I saw it, I'm like, this is it. But I actually didn't understand in that moment why it was it. I thought the reason was, man, what a great bridge to like bridge me from my work career to my portfolio life. I'll take the summer off. I won't do anything. I'll start in school September and like it'll keep me busy. I mean, honestly, that's the way I thought about it. I came into it in September thinking, if I had to stand up and do my purpose plan right now, I could do it. I was overconfident because I had a plan, which having a plan makes it safe. Having a plan gives you a sense of control. And what I started learning through the program is like, I needed to let go of that. I needed to let go of the plan. I needed to let go of control. I needed to get uncomfortable. And so, what I thought of as a bridge has actually completely disrupted me, which I think was the point. So, I'll share with you, and I've shared this with others before. So I stepped down June 1st. The first 3 days were phenomenal. Sleep in, do whatever I want to do, nothing on my schedule. By day 4, I was lost. And I mean it. By day 4, I'm looking at my calendar, there's nothing on it. I'm looking at my email, there's nothing in the inbox. So I knew like I needed to do something. So I immediately jumped to like structuring my portfolio life, joined a bunch of boards, did all that stuff. And fine, like it was good, it's been helpful, but the program has really kind of stripped me down. And hello to Harry Davis, who I loved our experience going through his coursework. But traveling lightly, I might not have been a buyer of that before. I'm a big buyer of it now. And so like I think part of this is let yourself like have that uncertainty. It's actually a gift because in the uncertainty is when you get real discovery. So the program's been unbelievable. The cohort, like I can't begin to describe the power of that. It's like nothing like I've ever experienced. And it's relationships that are built on a lot more depth than most of mine, which is like, oh, you like sports, I like sports, let's be friends. So it's just been amazing, but in ways that I didn't expect.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for starting us out here. And I want to come to Diana. So, we've talked about these principles. They're coming from what's called the University of Chicago Leadership and Society Initiative, where Bob is a fellow and where Diana is the executive director. And so, Diana, let me ask you to start by just giving a snapshot of the Leadership and Society Initiative Fellowship for everyone here who may not be familiar, and then would love to then go further with you to talk about kind of how you see individuals handling this moment, maybe following on Bob's word. But let's start by laying out the big picture. What is LSI?
Yeah, so thank you, Seth, and thank you, Bob, and just to everyone for being here for this conversation. It's such a pleasure. So the Leadership in Society Initiative supports accomplished leaders in transitioning beyond their primary career arcs into next chapters that are characterized by purpose, enduring intellectual and personal growth, and also contribution to society. And we do that through a liberal arts style learning experience built around 3 pillars, which are knowing oneself, understanding the world, and envisioning the future. And to everything that Bob spoke to, not only LSI, but the University of Chicago has a very rich tradition steeped in the liberal arts with the belief that that style of learning that's based very much in critical inquiry, kind of rigorous intellectual expansiveness is a key to, shaping better questions and learning how to flex those muscles of fluid intelligence, which are connecting dots across domains, being creative problem solvers, being very analytical. And that at this transitional moment and going through this kind of journey that you've heard from Bob, that being able to, just like think more deeply about how to ask and re-ask questions is actually more valuable initially than knowing exactly what the answers might be. So by design, within those 3 learning pillars, our fellows are exposed to a variety of different frameworks for introspection, different kind of academic and scholarly lenses for evaluating different societal issues, both root causes, but also the efficacy of different interventions for change. And then also envisioning pathways to driving positive change. They learn from practitioners across the social sector and private sector who are doing, socially oriented work to think about where they might be able and well situated to contribute. And as you heard Bob mention, the capstone of this fellowship experience is what we refer to as a next chapter roadmap. And so over the course of their time in fellowship, each fellow through this liberal arts exploratory process is distilling down their why, their what, and their how for this next stage of living and leading purposefully. And what that really means in our estimate is helping them discover the nexus of what they see as their superpowers, the values that are really animating them at this moment in time, and where there might be opportunities or unmet needs in the world that they are well positioned to offer their talents, their wisdom, their capabilities towards. And so, it has been absolutely extraordinary to watch the ways, I think you heard this, Bob, you spoke to this so beautifully. Like, it's very liberating, I think, for fellows to walk into, a 9-month liminal space together where their only mandate is to discover, to experiment, to reflect, and to trust that in doing that, they will ultimately create for themselves greater clarity and confidence about this next chapter of their lives. And Bob said it best, the number one value of doing this is being in that cohort of peers, and the ways in which we've seen fellows simultaneously be each other's greatest champions and advocates and cheerleaders when there's moments of doubt and kind of destabilization, but also their greatest constructive critics, and being the first to say, I hear your idea, but I don't totally get it. Can you walk me through it? Can you help me understand what it is you're thinking about or researching or trying to drive forward? So yeah, that's a bit about kind of LSI and the way that we imagine the liberal arts can be additive to those principles of generativity that Seth shared in the beginning.
Well, so Bob, can we come back to you now? Because I think what's interesting about this is that Diana has described what I think for many on this might be an unusual idea that, you are 60 years old, you are highly accomplished, you've just finished as CEO of a major financial services firm, and you are going back to school to read great books, to be in class. You're called a fellow of the initiative, but you are in part a student as well as a contributor on campus. Can you talk about what that's been like, and what would you say are some of the big lessons that you're taking away from being 6 months now into your 9-month journey on campus?
Well, I will say when I tell people what I'm doing, they first assume I'm teaching, and I do have to always correct them. I'm like, no, I'm a student. I've got a backpack. The only difference is mine's a leather to me, because when I was an undergrad, I couldn't afford something like that. But learning how to learn again is amazing and hard. Let me just say that, because what I didn't fully appreciate being a CEO is like all the information I get is very synthesized. Like I'm not reading hundreds of pages. I mean, I'd probably fire someone for making me do that. Like I get distilled information, I get lots of data, and now you have to go back and actually read and comprehend. And I'm a business person. Like I didn't have a liberal arts background. So I'm reading things I've never read before. I'm seeing words I've never seen before. And that forces you like to really use that muscle up here. And it's like, how in the world do I keep up with it? And so you also learn how to like get some tricks and some like structure to yourself to get through it. So learning how to learn is amazing. And being on a college campus, I just can't like describe how uh, like liberating it is, how energizing it is. And so we live in a world where we do so much via Zoom. I spent 5 hours on Zooms today. And hey, it's great. I don't have to be in an airport, but being on a college campus, like being around knowledge and students, like it's just hard to fully articulate the value of that. So I completely get why the program's in person. It's just such a richer experience. So for me, it's challenging me in ways I haven't been challenged in a long time. Diana mentioned, the cohort and I'll give a couple of examples. So we had a retreat at the end or beginning of December at the end of the term. And, I had to share with one of my cohort members like 2 minutes on things that scare me, 2 minutes on things that make me mad. Like they're really simple questions, but I'd ask any of you out there, it's like really hard and intimidating, like to on the fly have to look at somebody who's 6 or 8 inches away from you and talk about these things. But what it does is it like opens you up in ways we just normally don't engage. And the amount of intimacy and depth of the relationship gets formed really quickly when you do it. I mean, I told my wife about this. She's like, "What?" She's like, "Oh my God, I could never do that." And I probably didn't think I could either. And when you do, it's amazing what it feels like, and it's just exploring all these parts of you that are there. I'll give Harry another shout out, like the stage page metaphor. When I first heard it, I'm like, well, what's this? What's he talking about? And then as I started to explore it, like it really resonated with me that we all have these characters inside us. Some we play a lot, some we don't play as much, some we'd like to play but don't know how, some we probably overplay. And so you're learning to think about like topics you think from very different perspectives, which just is really formative and changed the way I view a lot of things.
Well, I love that so much, Bob. I think it speaks to the generativity of relationships and the generativity of putting yourself into new situations. And I think that it's really challenging to a level that we don't appreciate as you get further and further steeped into a career, especially if you're accomplished and successful, right? It has this incredible opportunity that may come with it in a number of respects, but it's also narrowing to the very point that you made in terms of the experience gets managed because of all of the different responsibilities. And so you lose certain muscles. And so putting yourself back into this situation allows you to have that ability to regenerate and revitalize in some ways, and then enter this next chapter with a whole expanded horizon set that obviously was possible, but not necessarily clear at the moment at which you finished at Hightower.
Well, and to go from being an expert at something to being expert at almost none of it. I mean, some of it, like that's why I loved Harry's stuff around leadership, because I really connect to the power of great leadership. But a lot of it, like completely unprepared, as low on the expertise as you can. But yet some of my cohort members were actually very steeped in it because they may have come out of areas where that was what they were exposed to. So it's really interesting just to see the dynamic of like the mix of experiences and backgrounds and how it comes together.
Well, so I want to come to questions from the audience, but let me just put one more question to you and Diana. And for any audience members who have questions, please put them into the chat and we want to come to them. We also welcome comments in the chat for people that have experiences that might be relevant to how you've seen generativity. So for both of you, let me start with you, Bob. A big part of the goal for LSI is that individuals over the course of their year develop what we call the purpose plan, which is that roadmap for how you're going to embrace the possibilities of your next chapter, often beyond a long-standing career arc. Can you give us 6 out of the 9 months in now, a little bit of a snapshot of how you're thinking about your purpose plan? And then, Dan, I want to hear from you kind of what you've seen across the 100 fellows that you've now been in the lives of.
So I probably haven't shifted much away. Well, I actually have shifted and come back to it of wanting to have a portfolio life where I do a variety of different things. But I think what's become very clear to me is like impact, and I want to do things that have real impact, whatever that looks like in that situation. But it needs to be like obvious to me that if I'm allocating time to it, I can actually make an impact. So, I almost went full circle and entertained going back into a operational role as a CEO again, and explored it quite a bit, enough to actually come to the conclusion. I said no, which was also really liberating because I'm not a guy that often says no to things, especially no to a challenge. And so I was proud of myself that I sort of came around, and after I thought, I'm like, no, that's not what I want to do. That takes me away from too many of the principles that I've put forth that are important to me. So I went into this with a huge passion for mental health. Like it's touched me personally and my family, and wanted to make an impact there. And I'm not abandoning it, but I'm sort of shifting more towards at the college level, creating a program around balance, because I've observed, especially high performing students are so over indexed, no offense, to academics, that they're losing like touch with other things that are really important. So creating a program that sort of force functions academic excellence with mental health, with physical health, with overall wellness, with the intent that, you know, kids have enough pressure. They don't need to, come out of college having never experienced like building social relationships, having fun. So it's actually a work in process right now with my alma mater. And I'm thankful they're very engaged in wanting to work with me to, I'm not going to say solve it because I don't think you solve anything, but to contribute to making an impact. And we want to start with college freshmen because you then have 4 years to propagate, you know, that thinking to others, and you can start to get some exponential impact.
Well, I love that purpose because it speaks to a few things, Bob. One, it speaks to the willingness to travel lightly and say no to what might have sounded like a really exciting external benchmark, but it didn't meet your moment and where you want to go in the future. And two, it speaks to really getting back to some of those internal motivations, right? This is something that is with your alma mater, that is probably something you've thought about since the day that you were on that campus. And now looking back, you have a chance to really influence it. Diana, can we come to you? You've seen now 100 individuals at this stage of life where they are finishing a long-standing career arc, they're thinking about what's next, and they are developing these purpose plans for how they engage in a really meaningful and purposeful next chapter of leadership. How have you seen individuals kind of, is there a way of kind of categorizing across these purpose plans?
Yeah, and I want to caveat what I'm about to say with one of the an influential quote that has become sort of near to dear in us from an LSI comes from President Dwight Eisenhower, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he said that in the Army he learned that there are no plans, there is only planning. And so, though we use this nomenclature of a purpose plan, we want to be very candid about the fact that it's a bit of a misnomer for two reasons. One is that there's no perfect silver bullet of a 9-month fellowship for perfect clarity for the next, potential multiple decades of your life, especially with such a significant transition in life stage that leaders in LSI are in. But also that part of the beauty of this life stage is being dynamic, is being innovative and iterative. And so part of why the liberal arts is so powerful in our context is it sets our fellows up with, a really multifaceted toolkit that they can, pick up and put down different things that they've been exposed to as they go through that ongoing, kind of iterative cycle, while still, part of what goes into the purpose plan is their approach to, really kind of codifying and solidifying their approach to stay grounded in their principles for purposefulness that they've set forward, to use Bob's language, right? That they are returning to those, that is their North Star, that is kind of helping them navigate what is in alignment with their vision and what might not be, and they say no to. But with that as a bit of a caveat, we have seen a bit of a spectrum form of the types of visions and approaches that fellows take leaving their time in LSI. And it's bookended by what we refer to as an outside in approach and an inside out approach. And what we mean by that is outside in, there are fellows who, really spend their time in LSI called almost like a deep calling of service to a societal need. It ranges very widely. We have fellows working on violence prevention, food insecurity, economic mobility, education reform. It really runs the gamut. And their discernment process is going through realizing that if they can even move the needle in the smallest way on that area that really is of deep kind of personal meaning to them, that they will derive a sense of purpose, fulfillment, enrichment, and feel like they are purpose driven in this stage of their lives. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a lot of fellows who their big aha moments and kind of transformative learning is more in that knowing oneself side of our curriculum. And so they really have realizations around, you know what, if I can reinvest in my own wisdom and kind of activate that outwardly in new ways, and really also invest in my own growth, my relationships, my loved one, my community, that's going to set me up to be the most impactful leader that I could be. And so many of those fellows are thinking about, you know, what can I do in my own backyard to be more purpose driven? How can I change the lives of a few individuals in my like local community or my network? And many of those fellows also go on to do writing or teaching or thinking about ways to activate and enable up and coming leaders and talents to, you know, expand their footprint and do greater good. So it's no surprise that what's ringing in my head is as Seth mentioned, David Brooks has been an instructor in LSI and also just very influential in our thinking about how to support leaders at this inflection point. And he said, you know, as he's been thinking about this life stage, he hears a lot of people talk about a second mountain or a third act as like a mathematical equation to be solved, right? Like, what are the exact inputs and the exact, you know, tabulation to yield the outputs I want. And as he's reflected, he feels like actually distilling a next chapter of purpose should feel more like falling in love, right? That it's something intangible that kind of speaks to you and calls to you and pulls you forward. And so if in that framework, it's no surprise that we see such a wide array. And again, for us here at LSI, when we think about activating leaders and catalyzing them to contribute to the world, all of it is so critical and necessary. And so it's been wonderful to see that variety.
Well, and I think what was so cool is that David was like inspired by this program and is doing it himself. And we
Yes.
had an opportunity to spend 3 hours with him a couple of days before he was going to publicly announce it. But like the program inspired him to like I need to do something different. And he's not doing anything like radically different, but like for him, it's a big step. And
Yeah.
you could just see the excitement like in him about like changing it up, which
Yeah.
means he's like getting rid of one thing he used to do a lot of to like go and do something, you know, bold and different.
Yeah.
Well, so there's actually a question in the chat that speaks to this. Someone here asks, how do you think about the greatest barriers to getting into this next chapter? And Bob, maybe we can start with you on your individual experience. I mean, you know, you must have felt a little bit intimidated or, you know, and you made a specific choice here, but what do you think as you look across many of your peers who are also entering this stage, what do you think are some of the greatest barriers to this idea of encore chapters,
Yeah.
and how do you overcome them? How did you have the courage, for example, to come to us as an example of kind of building that courage to try something new at a stage where you've just spent 30 years being, as you said, the expert in the room?
Well, you know, I think the barriers are twofold. One, you got to know yourself. Like take the time to get to know yourself. And believe me, you're gonna know a different self as you start to experience it. But as I shared, like I had a plan. So that took away anxiety. Now, thankfully, the plan got thrown to the side. But if I were giving advice, I'd say it's okay to have a plan. Like it's okay to give yourself some comfort, like, oh yeah, I can create something I think I want. Cause I think it then gives you the courage to like push forward, but then be willing to like throw it all away. So it's almost like create the plan, then throw it off to the side. But I think people just tend to like to play things safe. And if you're really going to you know truly explore yourself and what you know at your deepest core like motivates you and gives you joy and satisfaction, you can't play it safe. You know, you got to strip down, you got to get very vulnerable, you've got to explore things you haven't ever explored. But like the you know the return for that, you know, I think can be incredible.
Diana, any observations on a kind of, you know, macro basis, seeing many extraordinary
Yeah.
people like Bob?
Yeah, I guess just to build on what Bob said, you know, I do think that kind of getting over the hump of that like initial destabilization, um, there is like a moment where, or a period or a phase where, yeah, like kind of taking yourself down to the studs, or even not necessarily that. I do feel like I find that while many fellows are thinking about, pivoting and experimenting and trying something different, most of them are also carrying a lot forward with them that they do enjoy. That is, they are passionate about. That is an extension of leadership and work and expertise that they already have. So I just want to name that most people are not like wholesale completely shedding their skin. So it's a blend of those things. But I think that in that, dichotomy, there is like a process of figuring out the right product market fit in a new way for their talents and where there are needs and how they can explain the skills that they bring in different contexts in a way that is connective, right? And there's thankfully, like through our work, there's lots of opportunity for them to try out like different strategies for doing that. But I heard a fellow give a good analogy of this recently, where she said, I feel like I was a very good college basketball player. And now I'm trying to get on a professional NFL team, right? So you know that there are clear athletic translatable talents in that, but trying to explain to the NFL why, as a collegiate basketball player, they should draft you is just a little bit of it's a riddle to solve. But I think most fellows do, with a little bit of experimentation, figure out a way to navigate that. But it takes some time and
Well,
some
well,
thought.
well, I'm 6'4" and I run a 4.40. That
Perfect,
should get
perfect.
somebody interested.
I'll let her know. I'll let her know that that's the ticket.
Well, so we are at time. Let me just ask though for any closing remarks, Anna and Bob, in terms of, one piece of wisdom that you'd share, and then I'll close us out. Uh, Bob, can we come back to you? What's your
Uh,
greatest aha moment so far?
I mean, I've said it a couple of times, but if you have a plan, throw it aside and just let the journey, let the discovery, let the instability and the discomfort actually be a joy, not the opposite. And because guess what, you can always come back to what you know. Like that's the easy answer, and it's always there for you.
Yeah.
Anna?
I would just say that as we've been developing LSI, I've been struck the sentiment we've heard over and over again is that as people reach this inflection point, they feel like they are simultaneously losing a sense of identity, purpose, and community all at once, and that can feel really isolating. So, looking for ways to deepen relationships, to share this experience with others, to find communities of learning as you reflect on what might be energizing to you and what you might contribute to the world in this next phase. I do think it's, really important and can be challenging to kind of reach out, since this is a huge paradigm shift, and people who are going through this now are really at the forefront of redefining leadership opportunities in this life chapter. And so would just encourage folks to connect with one another, and I do, like Bob, I think that there's tremendous joy on the other side of that.
Well, and I'll close with this thought. We've spent this hour really focused on principles of generativity for the individual. One of the really cool aspects is that as individuals are finding that generativity, what we're seeing now, 100 fellows into this, is immense impact for the world at large. And what's been so exciting is to see individuals who are activated and purposeful. And then, I mean, Bob, you're an example. I know that you're going to make a huge difference at your alma mater in setting up a program that is going to build a holistic approach to wellness. And we now see 100 examples of individuals who have immense talents being activated. And when you think about the demographics that we started with and that Elizabeth named, there is an immense opportunity in the world if we can activate the full talent capacity of incredible individuals who are over 50 and 60 now, for that to be unleashing all of this innovation potential for society. So we'll just leave with the thought of yes, we hope that you individually become more generative, and just think about the world that we can build if we unleash the generativity of all of these individuals at a stage in life where they are thinking very much about how they contribute to the lives of others and build meaning. So thank you all in Hong Kong for sharing your morning with us. Thank you all in the US for sharing your evening with us. Thank you, Elizabeth and Shannon, for being such great partners in this. And I hope everyone has a good evening and a good day, depending on where this finds you. Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.